They call it the flower that breaks out of the concrete. And I think that stems from our kind of persistence to keep moving. I think people that are from Split are for Split.
Split is a city shaped by stone, but it has never stopped pushing through the cracks. It didn't grow around a port or a fortress, but instead around a mighty palace. A palace built not for power, but for retirement. Today, cafes buzz where imperial guards once stood. Ice cream melts where emperors once gave orders. Because the old town of Split isn't beside Diocletian's palace, it is Diocletian's palace. Split is not the same city, though, that it was 2,000 years ago, nor is it the same city it was just 30 years back. Some of its most dramatic changes came long after the Romans were gone. Like a flower pushing through concrete, Split has a way of persisting, and the people who call it home have never stopped claiming it as their own. Today, as the city rebuilds its identity in the decades since the Croatian War of Independence, Split is still transforming, still searching for solid ground it can spread its roots in and truly call its own. To understand who Split is today, we must first understand where Split began.
Built in the 4th century AD, this was the home of Diocletian, the only Roman emperor to retire of his own free will.
A man of contradictions. A soldier emperor who reformed the empire, introduced the tetrarchy, and claimed divine status, all while planning to grow cabbages in peace.
He built temples and walls, quarters for soldiers and slaves, and even a mausoleum to house his legacy. Ironically, his final resting place became a Christian cathedral dedicated to a faith he tried to destroy. History rewrites even emperors.
After Rome's fall, the palace wasn't abandoned. It was adapted. Locals moved in. They didn't just preserve history, they lived it. Stones became shelter, corridors became homes. The palace evolved not into a museum, but into a functioning city. And that's still true today, to an extent. More on that later.
Split is one of the only cities on Earth where modern life still unfolds in a Roman palace. Here you can sleep where soldiers once marched and sip espresso where priests once chanted.
It's a daily negotiation between heritage and habitat, between reverence and routine.
Here, history isn't behind a glass, it's in the rhythm of everyday life. You hear it in the market stalls, echoing off of old stone. You hear it in the wind when it whistles through the alleys where centurions once stood.
This is what makes Split different. It's not about looking at ruins. It's about being part of them, whether you know it or not. And all of that is thanks to the foundations of this place.
These underground chambers were never designed to impress. They were architectural infrastructure, functional, hidden, and forgotten. Yet they are a huge reason why this palace has survived. Beneath the emperor's opulent halls was a skeleton of engineering genius. The substructure mirrored the layout of the palace above. It supported their weight while hiding the palace's practical systems. This included things like water channels, granaries, waste shafts, and even an oil press.
Roman engineers used barrel vaults, limestone from Brack Island, and complex drainage systems to ensure the foundations would outlive their master. And they did. These basements outlasted earthquakes, invaders, and time itself. But for centuries, these vaults were sealed off, known only to those who needed them. During the Middle Ages, they became a dumping ground. Centuries of refuse accumulated here, preserving the space through accidental protection.
It wasn't until the 20th century that the underground vaults beneath the palace were excavated. What archaeologists found was truly fascinating, an entire substructure, and it's been untouched since antiquity. All of that garbage had actually kept this area pristine.
These basements speak to more than just logistics. They held grain, but they also held secrets. Historians believe these tunnels were used often during wartime as storage, shelter, and a place for strategy. In World War II, and again in the Yugoslav wars, they were places to hide what mattered most.
The genius of Diocletian's engineers wasn't in the marble above, but in the mud and mortar below. Down here you understand the true strength of the empire, not of its politics, but its foundations. And in a time when so many empires have crumbled, maybe it's the parts that you don't see, the unglamorous and the invisible, that hold up the past longest. In recent years, Diocletian's palace has become host to new legends, that of dragons.
Split stood in for Marine in HBO's Game of Thrones. Its stone alleys reimagined as cities of conquest and rebellion. Fantasy completely reshaped reality, but the real stories of this ancient city are even more fascinating. In a palace built for an emperor who called himself divine, new myths have been layered over the old. And the result is a city that's both memory and mirage. Diocletian's palace is no longer just a relic. It's a stage, a backdrop, a commodity. What was once a retirement complex is now a setting for weddings, streaming specials, and tourist fantasies. But the challenging part of this, however, is that Split's identity and the identity of those that call it home have shifted. With the influx of tourists, you have to begin to wonder, what's even real? The palace that was built for an emperor? The city that's been sculpted by memories? Or is it the crowd with selfie sticks capturing it all? The magic of this place isn't the dragons or the drama, or the hordes of summer visitors. It's learning about everything that's happened here and is still happening, within the palace walls and beyond them.
Few cities blur the line between ancient and everyday like Split does. This place isn't a frozen relic, it is a home, it's a marketplace, it's a playground. Diocletian's palace, for all of its grandeur, has become a canvas for modern day life. You'll find a vegan cafe next to a 4th century granite column, a yoga studio above an old grain vault. It's not just the architecture that's lived in, it's also the rhythm of the place. The voices, the smells, the ordinary joys that carry on through time.
Living inside a UNESCO World Heritage Site isn't always glamorous. Plumbing is complicated, restoration rules are strict, and tourism brings crowds, pressure, and rising rent.
But the people of Split have made the palace their home, not necessarily through preservation, but through participation. They live within the walls of history without necessarily romanticizing it. It's just life.
But the palace and the tight streets around it are no longer what they were. Rising tourism has pushed many residents into nearby districts, raising the cost of living and reshaping the city's identity. Whether for better or for worse depends on whom you ask.
My name is Tony, I'm 27, I live in Split and have been living here for most of my life. Split is a very lively city, especially considering its size. Us as locals, we have a different dynamic, connected to the town. Before, there was a lot more connection to the town, but now a lot more locals are looking for, especially in the summertime, to, hang out outside of the city center. I don't know if you saw the prices here of the, living and our wages, but it's not a good combo. When you're talking about young people, when they see all these prices and the tourists, and now Split is trying to work its way up to luxury tourism, which bumps up the prices even more. I say at first glance and without much thinking, it looks hopeless. But if you're willing to stick around and find out, I think there's a lot of good things to find as well. Split people have been historically hardworking people. We came from, stone and olives, and I don't think it will lose all of its identity, but I think Split needs to, I hope it works towards keeping that identity. A lot of people don't see potential in, Gen Z and, how they're moving forward, but I see a lot of creativity in their heads. I think they could be, in the next 10 to 20 years, people who really preserve and, give importance to what Split is really meant to represent culturally.
Beneath the beauty of Split lies a deeper memory. A city that's endured sieges, occupations, and rebirths. Like much of the Balkans, Split was pulled through the trauma of the 20th century. The palace became a symbol of endurance. In the 1990s, while Dubrovnik was under siege, Split stood as a logistical hub. Families opened their doors to refugees. Monuments became morale. And even Tony, who was born after the war, grew up with its stories.
The tensions in the 90s were rising between the people, and they were mostly expressed through cultural events and, sport events. One of the football games that kind of kicked off the war, Croatia versus Belgrade, there was all-out fighting on the field during that game, and it kind of sealed the deal. The day-to-day life here was obviously quite stressful, because when you're fighting in a defensive war, your drafts don't look the best, and you obviously have to draft whoever is available or willing. And all of our factories, turned to production of military equipment. My father was 17, 18 when he was stationed, so he was quite young, so he wasn't very on the front lines, but my grandparents were. There was a lot of, tension. The attack on Split kind of struck fear on and kind of brought the war to your front door. This resulted in a period after a war which wasn't that great, because you had all of these people come back very hurt, and our industry very hurt, and a very turbulent couple of years from the 95 till 97. Even if you personally weren't in the war, there was a lot of, tension. Uncle, your friend, someone was involved.
Some stories, like Tony and his family's from that time, are well documented. Others live only in memory. Quiet recollections of neighbors who disappeared, of nights spent listening for sirens instead of sleep. If you ask anyone old enough to remember, you'll hear the same refrain. We didn't know if the fighting would come to Split next. We were lucky, we were afraid. There were shortages, blackouts, the tension of not knowing who to trust.
You still have, living grandparents of people who were, they saw terrible things. I'd say, and then, they condition their kids to think like them, and then you have a problem where, there's a lot of blaming, and there's a lot of, tensions with people who don't have anything to do with the war anymore, and they still have this kind of ongoing hate between them. I can't say I blame the parents that much. I mean, it's a very traumatic period, and it's really, not easy to deal with it afterwards.
But there was also a solidarity. Strangers sharing bread, musicians playing in courtyards just to remind each other that they were alive. The palace has worn many faces, an imperial showpiece, medieval slum, and modern tourist magnet. But through it all, Split's beating heart has remained. And that heart, weathered but unbroken, still beats in stone. It's easy to miss in the daylight, but at dawn and dusk, when the crowds fade and the walls exhale, you can almost hear it remembering. After the war, Split didn't just recover, it completely reinvented itself. The 1990s and early 2000s brought a cultural explosion. The underground scene in Split became a creative force. Neighborhoods that once felt peripheral began to change. Some became hubs of art and nightlife. Others struggled with neglect. There are two Splits now, the polished palace at the center and the city living beyond its gates.
There was this cultural reignition. Old residential places that now are finding life to these, small businesses, small, clubs are now opening in these areas which they never have been before, and cafe bars, art places, they're now moving away from the city center to provide a 365 experience, for the locals. I'd say Split, as its name suggests, has always been a little bit split. It's a city that's split in its seams, but sewn together by its people. It's not unified in any sense, but kind of in its differentiations, it finds love for itself. There's this undying love for Split and this burning passion for people who live here.
In Split, history isn't something that you just look at, it's something that you walk through. You breathe in and sometimes forget until it reminds you.
This place has been called many names: a palace, a fortress, a ruin, a stage. It was built for an emperor who wanted to be a god and ended up only a memory. It was rebuilt by traders and refugees, by tourists and families, and is still being rebuilt now every time someone steps inside and imagines what it was. Maybe that's the truth of Split. You don't inherit a city like this, you borrow it. You hold it for a while, and then you leave it for whoever comes next. Cities disappear, myths change shape, even the strongest walls crack and crumble. But the stories, they settle in the dust, in the foundations, in the quiet spaces under everything. So, if you ever come here, don't just look for the beauty, even though there's a lot of it. Look for the questions. Who built this? Who survived it? And what will you leave behind when you walk away?
What's something that you would want people to know about Split?
A lot of people here, I'm very envious to how they're capable of, even with their history, to just keep moving forward. It's people in Croatia who haven't had the best opportunities, and they're still making the best for themselves. And I think you can find a lot of inspiration in the people. It's one of the few, rare cities that have been still standing for 2,000 years almost. And there's definitely a reason for that. It will show you its own way and its own history. It's not the city center that makes us, it's the dynamic between nature, the people, and the city center that makes a whole. That's why I love it. That's why I'm here still. Not giving up on Split yet.
Empires fade, but stories stay. And this palace? It remembers them all.